Hello, people of the internet. My name is Odur Jagero, and this is Dialogues with Jagero. Today, we are going to be discussing schooling.
Yeah,
School fees. A lot of school fees from around the country, in as far as university education has been flying around, and the idea is that the school fees are not for hustlers. When Ruto started campaigning, that he said that his government is based on hustling. And how lives for the hustlers are going to be better. And the turnaround is really swift.
Yeah.
We are seeing school fees that are not able to be afforded by the so-called hustlers. And the question is, you are somebody who teaches at university. I don't know what this means, because for me, I don't understand a lot of things. So today, I think that the best thing is to start by talking about Kenyan education generally, where the rain started beating us. I have never understood the idea of formal education. I don't know if you understand the idea of formal education and pre-formal education. What did we have?
I think that exactly is where the rain started beating us. We have to look at what did we inherit. You had the DP make a remark about, this is our company. So if you don't have any shares, remember, Kenya was once a company, if to be honest. It was a British company. And I don't know what people think about independence, whether we gained it or we merited it or we were just given, because at some point the company was not making good profit margins. But I think we have to look at what we inherited. When we got independence in 1963, there was a lot of things that were not quite okay. First of all, we inherited an education system that was civilizing the African. I'm very sure you know some of your older uncles or older parents who were Nyaparas, those who used to work in the railway, those who used to
My grandfather worked in Nyahururu.
Yes, and they had these kaptulas and
yes,
dressing very neatly, because there was a way of civilizing the African parent from the reserve, then taking them to the urban centers. One way of doing that was, there was something called hard tax. You couldn't pay a hard tax if you didn't have an income.
What tax?
Hard tax. Otherwise, the chief would come and they would pay, or they would auction a chicken or a goat somewhere. And then also it made sense that the subsistence farming that was happening in the reserves were no longer productive enough. So you had to be employed for you to be a productive member of the society. How do you do that if you do not have the technical skills or the employable skills? You have to go to school. You have to go on a technical training. And for you to do that, you have to go through a school system. So we had a school system that was in place. But what was happening in that school system? We had two distinct areas, actually three. We had the African, and then we had, I think, the Asian.
The Indians.
Yeah, the Indians. And then we had the white settler. So that is how you had schools like Alliance and Maseno, very distinct schools. When people talk about education system in this country, you can't mention out, you can't leave out Maseno and Alliance. Why? Because one, they are the model of a good school that we can have in Kenya. They are the aspirational. When we were doing our KCPE, one of our top choices for most people was Alliance, Maseno, Starehe, because they were the model school. Which reflects what a good school should be. But then the advent of these schools was such that when Francis Carey were actually building these schools from scratch.
Francis Carey is the Starehe guy.
Yeah, no, Maseno and Alliance.
And who was Carey Francis?
Yes, that is the one for Alliance and Maseno. There was Griffins for Starehe.
Yes.
So he went around looking for top model students, and they actually did an interview, so that they can actually get the first cohort to study in these schools. If you look at how these teachers, most of them were teachers. If you look at Eliud Madhu, a few you've heard about him, these people were taught in the image of their first teachers, Akina Carey. So in other words, they were cultivating a culture of the missionary. And in essence, it was also to further the interest of mostly the white man. So when now we move a little bit further after independence, now we are left with the country. We are now the black man. The black man hardly ever is in the interest of his fellow black man. He wants to rip off the country. He wants to also be in the image of the white man who was actually domiciling and exerting a lot of pressure on the African. That is actually what created our first ever problem. So we had the Nyaparas, the people who are in place of the white settler farmers or the colonialists or the administrators. So these are the people who now have the resources, they now have the government power structure, and they have a lot of influence. In fact, that is also the departure from ideology, from African ideology. So much so that when Akina Mboya were actually writing the sessional paper in 1965, it was basically on paper. It was not practical, but the only difference between then and now is there was a belonging, a sense of belonging to our national philosophy. If you called for a town meeting, people would show up. If you were to rally to stand for a seat, people believed in you because they would see that these values are actually taken care of when you go into parliament. Hardly ever is the case today. So that departure made our first problem. It created an elitism, like an elite school system, where for you to be considered to have gone to school, you have to have attended a certain school. But what about the person who didn't go to that school? What about the person who couldn't? Because I remember my grandfather struggled a lot through his schooling, from what he told me. At some point, he had to drop out, hard goats, do manual labor, work as an office boy, so that he could raise his fee and then go back. This is a common trend for many people, even to date. People who are in their 40s or 30s, that is when they're now going back to school to do their undergrad. Because the reality or the circumstances when they were coming up, when they were youth, was actually subverted. So our first departure is the creation of an elite school system. So almost so much that it's like a parallel education system within the country. So it's not the same.
What I don't understand is, why were they creating it? To what end?
To what end?
Were they creating it?
To what end? I think also what I say, to imitate the image of the white man. Does that make sense?
I don't think it makes sense to me, but then so once you were educated in the model of a white man,
yes,
then that was, so to the white person, that was an extension of them.
So being civilized.
So creating white men.
Creating white men in
education.
Yes. Because one, we had knowledge production system in Africa. We had what is called apprenticeship, yeah? Where you could, if somebody was a blacksmith and you wanted to be a blacksmith, you could just sit under their shadow and you would learn that craft. We had teachers, actually, people who taught by storytelling, who taught by diviners, George Walk, not really in the bad connotation. So we had all this. But when they came, where was I? So I was saying that we had a system in place, what we might call the traditional African societies. They had their value system, they had the way they taught, in quotes. So when these people came, remember, white men came from a very different society with very different demands. And in fact, this is also what many people consider as the impetus that drove innovation. Because if you live in a certain environment where there is snow, where there is all these kinds of vagaries of weather, then you need to really innovate in terms of living comfortably. So when they come here, they realize that they want to civilize us, they want to build rails. But for you to build rails, do you know what they had to do? They had to bring Indians, because the British were also colonizing India. So they had to bring the Sikhs, the Sikhs who were actually...
This is how Indians
found themselves here, besides, of course, slave trade and all that. But they found themselves here because they were offering technical skills to build the railway. That is just an example. So if you needed, let's say, a secretary who could type, you couldn't come to an African who used to look at the sun to tell the time. You had to put them through training. How do you do that training? You have to create a school system that can actually adapt this person to actually be of value to you in your office or in your... This is what is called the productivity class. Because for you to have to be productive, you have to go through a school system. But now what happens to you are formally, your former education or former expertise or skill, does it mean that it is useless? Of course not. But now, because now things are changing, we now have a system in place, capitalism, we have companies that are running, we have a government in place that has different departments. All these things need knowledgeable people or experts to run them.
And then this brings us to the elitist schools that we have.
Yes.
So the question is, are they elitist because they were the first ones, or are they elitist because the white men actually created elitist schools?
It was created before, so we only inherited it.
Yes, but for example, when Maseno was built, Maseno is elitist, Alliance is elitist, was elitist, and is elitist. Did we have other schools?
Yes, we had other schools. And do you know what they were called? Is it was it tertiary? It was not tertiary. But there was a name in between. In fact, even I'm sure you've heard about high school and secondary school. This is also one of its origin, because high schools used to offer, I think, from 5 and 6, but secondary schools used to not have that full length of from 5 and 6. So that's one of the ways. But also it was elite because, not just because of imitating the white man, because one, it was created and it was the available topmost. Not everybody could go there. That's why I was telling you, when Akinakare were doing the interview, they had to pick people who actually they felt modeled enough to be able to be admitted to these schools. But generally, a good school system should actually be able to pick almost every person in the society and run with it, because it is able to customize or to recognize the different ways in which we are different, the different ways in which we can be able to be skilled, the value or the resources that we can be able to bring through our training. Yeah.
Then we started having many other schools, apart from Maseno, apart from Alliance, Lenana, Kenya High, and Maranda, and all these other schools. I went to Lembo Secondary School, where I used to walk back and forth. I remember in our lab, we only had those things that look like bottles. What are they called?
The round bottom flasks.
Yes.
Chemistry.
Yeah, for chemistry.
Yeah.
It was not a very good school, and I think at that time it was called provincial. And one of the schools that we were really amazed at and wowed at was, Tudiburo High School.
I went to school.
Yes. And then there was Nyabondo. And then there were others like Kisumu Boys. And then you go all the way to Miranda. And the other side, I don't think they were Kisii High,
Cardinal
Otunga. They were, then you realize that although you are in this village school, there is only one exam.
Yeah.
And I don't know what you think about what your reaction or what you make of the fact that we had so many different schools in so many ways, but the exam was just one. I want us to talk about that, and then you will go back to talking about why our education system is exam-oriented. Yeah.
I think one thing that we have to recognize is the level of playground has not been even from the word go. Talk of Tudiburo. Tudiburo was a very small school. Before
it was built by the Japanese.
Yes. It was a miserable school.
Yeah, and also before it was taken over by Obunga.
Yes. So it is actually Obunga and the Japanese that actually revived it and gave it life and gave it breath. Before that, it was a nondescript school. So we have to recognize how capacity building for schools, from infrastructure to staffing to being competitive enough to leverage with other schools is important. If we do not look at how the teacher-student ratio is, the support staff, labs, because I remember other schools had to go to other schools for their practicals during exams. You can imagine how frustrating that is. But now we have Tudibo, which is, I would call, let's call it a model school. It has the laboratories, it has good teachers, and the ratio between teachers and students is fairly enough or fairly well, and then it is well equipped. So this actually recognizes how we look at the greater scale of Kenya, because most schools are not actually that equipped. Most schools don't have teachers that are enough. Most schools don't have the support staff, because if you might have all these other resources, but the support staff is also inadequate, it means the whole ecosystem is inadequate in some point. So we have, you say that there were schools we used to aspire to be like. In fact, teachers would constantly remind, be like, when I went to this school, these other students, they do this, because we felt that if we were to do things the same way that they do, then we might be able to catch up with them or compete well enough as they do. But is that the case? Of course, to an extent, but not entirely. This comes to how people do exams, because now we have one exam that is being examined all over the country. Whether or not, there was this particular very interesting thing when I was in high school. You find that national schools back then, you find that by third year, they have already cleared their syllabus. Now, you come back to local schools, because one, teacher-student ratio, and then also, just general difficulties and challenges that these other local smaller schools are facing. By third year, they're still struggling with second year curriculum. They are very far off from finishing the workload. Understand? I don't know whether it is practical to rush through doing what is called a crash program to finish what is supposed to be done in 4 years, in 3 years. I don't know the rationale behind it, but I feel like the essence or the rationale behind it, why most schools were doing it, is because it gave them the last year, the fourth year, it gave them time to revise and go back and just weed out, to just be prepared enough for the exams. But now what happens to those who are not able to even finish by the time KCSE is being examined? What do we do for them? And yet now we have only one exam. This is also, I think, one of the genesis of exam cheating, because now for you to be competitive enough, you're actually being examined by one paper, and then this paper was deified. It would determine your life. That is actually what actually used to be peddled around.
Deified.
Yes.
So very interesting.
Yes, it's like a god. It's godlike. Like this exam, this one exam will determine your life. If you fail, I'm very sure you've heard about
I remember it. After I did my class, my Form 4, the results came, and the reason why I never stepped, I never went to the university doors is just exactly that. Because when the results came, I remember we were in a midweek prayer, and I was informed that I had actually gotten a B minus with 59 points, and the cutoff points was 62.
62, I think, back then, yeah.
And that was the end of me and university.
Look at that. So you're condemned to this as a failure just because you never qualified. I think when the government was trying to cure that ill is when they introduced, I think, something was sort of like an affirmative action. When now they were lowering points for Northeastern Frontier or girls. Girls had a lower point for entry into the university, or areas like Northeastern, or that were a bit challenged in terms of infrastructure, insecurity, and all that. But does it cure entirely that? What if we went back to the model? I was telling you off camera that when we look back at estates like Jericho, Maringo, Bahati, these were model estates. In fact, before people started building shacks and tin shacks next to these houses, they were really good houses. In fact, people who lived there who are considered to have made it really far. Now, the reason why I call them a model estate is because they were self-sufficient. They had a dispensary, they had a school, a community school, they had a playing field. It was well planned to accommodate the kind of population it has. And therefore, if you needed to go to school, you never really had to. The idea is you don't have to travel far for you to achieve a good education. This actually, if you look at most community colleges in America, they're really performing well now because people have realized that you don't have to go to an Ivy League school for you to be educated. Most people are now considering going to community college schools because they are offering the alternative, and that even
They're called community colleges because they're within the community.
that's one, and because they're tapping into the resource of that area. And then also they're offering, because one, fees in Ivy League schools is higher, and then it's also very competitive, and because it has a national outlook. So that is the same thing that the government really messed up when they gave charter to all those well-performing colleges. Like, remember, even Maseno, before it became a fully fledged university, we had the Siriba, was it an agricultural college?
Yeah.
Yeah. We have Machakos, which was a very good college back then. We have Chuka, which was a very good college back then. But now they were...
Kilimambogo?
Yes, Kilimambogo. So these were really good colleges back then. But now we felt like for it to be a school enough, you have to elevate it to be at a university level. It does not necessarily have to be like that. If we tap into it, like Eregi Girls, Eregi TTC, it's very like Kaimosi for School of Agriculture. So these were really good schools back then. If we tapped into their line of knowledge and expertise or training, then they would have really made highly specialized and good schooling. But now we felt like they had to be universities. And when we chartered them fully to be a university level, what we created is...
What is the idea behind chartering them to be universities? What changes when a Kaimosi becomes a university?
Well, the idea is, from my point of view, I think it was a matter of rewarding counties. Because if you look at them, most of them are at county levels. If you look at Meru, you look at Chuka, you look at Maseno, you look at Jost, Jaramogi. And then now that is the other thing. I'm very sure you've heard about the tribalism or the ratio of or the manner in which people do HR pooling, the head count. So you go to Jost and people are talking Jogdoluo in a national office, because that's a national office if it has become a fully fledged university, So you look at the percentages of people who are actually employed there vis-a-vis the national outlook that is supposed to be presenting.
How do we suddenly have only Luo lecturers at Jost?
Exactly that. Because you remember the crisis that happened in Moi?
No, I don't remember.
The crisis that happened in Moi happened when there was a vacancy in the VC position, the vice chancellor position. But now the person who was supposed to be taking after was, I think it was Professor Laban. I think he's Luya or Luo, I'm not sure. But the community from Moi main campus is largely Kalenjin. They were very hostile to this person. This also happened in Meru where Professor Romanus Odhiambo, who is actually a Luo, was going to Meru, and there was a bit of politics in it. The only thing that saved Professor Romanus is the community actually loved him and they knew he could deliver. So there was even a protest, which was very unlikely. But this was not the same case in Moi. In Moi, they actually refused completely. And if you go to Moi actually is ailing from a really deep political tribalism wound, because they are not able to tap extra beyond their ethnic community. Yet Moi is supposed to be a globally competitive college or university. Yeah, so that is what happened with Moi. Moi is still struggling with that to date. Jost, even University of Nairobi at some point was on the spotlight because people were saying just a majority are from one ethnic community. So this thing of rewarding, I think...
So Moi's, Kalenjins, Jost, Kankos, and Kisis, and Nairobi University, you'd say were Kikuyu?
I don't want to be on the spotlight because conflict of interest, but yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So we were rewarding county devolved units, but not looking in terms of what that would have made in the general sense of university education. If we would have just capacity built these colleges at the level that they were, it would mean that we would, because right now we have even Rongo University, which was, I think, a domicile part of Moi, if I remember correctly. Rongo was a good TTC until it started, it was elevated, and then now it's a Rongo University. But the infrastructure is zile. Teachers, some of them have to travel from Nairobi to Rongo, or travel from Kisumu, the University of Nairobi teachers are sharing. One lecturer is teaching in 4 other universities. I'm not saying it's impossible, but you can remember, you can actually try to grapple with the workload.
So you could be teaching at in the heart of Kisumu CBD.
Yes.
And then you were teaching at Yost, and then teaching in Kisii.
Muliro, you're teaching at Maseno.
But why is that?
Because teacher ratio. First of all,
what do you mean by teacher ratio?
Teacher-student ratio. Because one, there was a time, I don't know if you remember, there was a time when the government made, through Commission of Higher of QUE, Commission of Higher Education, they were saying that for you to be able to teach at the university, you have to have a PhD. Then all of a sudden, you're seeing a burgeoning number of people graduating with PhDs. First of all, a PhD is very demanding. You all know that. It's rigorous. So for you to be having such a ballooning in such a very short span, it means it's responsive to the market demands. But now it's not qualitative, because you have to be really rigorous. The training has to be really rigorous, and it can take a long time before you're qualified for it. But now we're realizing the number of people who have PhDs are very small. And then the number of people who have masters are also equally very small. So these people who are able to teach in the university are also very small. That means the ones that are available, that are qualified, can only do so much work before they are actually tired and exhausted. And that means most of them juggle up with teaching from private to public. They teach in so many other colleges and not just one, So that already tells you we have a crisis in terms of our tutors, in terms of the number of qualified tutors who can actually teach in the university. And if you have a shortage, then that means we are not delivering enough or delivering efficiently for our students. And that means the quality of education is actually compromised.
The university education school fees. First of all, I want to understand how the university works. How does the university generally work?
Well, universities are usually...
Because there is the issue of parallel students. There are teachers who are not actually employed by the government. There are so many things, so many inner workings at the university. How does the university operate?
The university has, let's call them four streams of capitation. So we have research, which is usually if to be honest, a university is supposed to be based on research. That is the foundation of a university, beyond undergraduate, of course. So we have research, we have fees for consultation and service delivery, and then we have capital and infrastructure, and then we have, of course, the education. So these four pillars is also what the government uses to fund the university. So do you have a research grant? Are you offering any consultation with the government? Like, let's say the Kenya School of Government.
A think tank.
It's like a think tank. Yeah, or you like the KK regime actually convened the university task force that came up with what we are supposed to talk about next. And then now we have the education, and then now we have the research. So these four pillars are what drives the university. But then again, you find that other universities that have existed for a longer time have better and innovative ways of actually surviving. No longer can a university just exist because it is a pillar of education or research. So they are actually looking in terms of what people call investment or endowment. So that when, for example, pension schemes, so a university can pull through maybe organizations or universities have to really be innovative to survive. Like, one thing that usually bothers me is how, for example, University of Nairobi has land that can actually be converted into agriculture and be productive enough to contribute to the national...
Where is the land?
This land, Kitui, at the coast, I think also, Kabete, which houses School of Agriculture and veterinary medicine area. So we have ways in which the university can be innovative enough to culture funds for its own, so that it doesn't have to rely on grants from foundations globally or from school fees or from the government. This enables it to be self-sufficient. It also enables it to provide solutions, because that is one of the things that many people are usually complaining about. The the wide rift between academics and real life issues. How does it offer real life solutions to real life problems? So you have people graduating but then unable to get back. I think you have seen it online how there's this fascinating picture of PhD and master's thesis trashed somewhere, and yet these are research that are purported to have been done in through field work, through data collection, and there's a rigorous process through that. So if you trash them, does it mean that the value within these theses or dissertations are useless? So if we could tap into the inner resources within a university, I think we could be able to make so many changes so that we don't have to rely on university as simply something that is very detached from real life problems. Yeah.
Yeah, the funding model at the university used to be cheap for each and every person.
Well, not really.
It used to be really cheap because people were paying very little.
That is you seeing it from the end of the product. Or
Yes, but that's how we are supposed to see it. The idea is university should be cheap. That's how we are supposed to see it, and that's how
it should be affordable and accessible.
Yes.
Yeah, that I.
So how was it working before? How you've already talked about the funding before, and now what is the new model of funding? What is going on?
So the old model used to have something called a differentiated unit cost. What a DUC means actually is there was one
differentiated unit
cost. So that means there was an equal grant for every student. It was just a flat rate, in other words, in layman's term. So the government used to give 80% contribution, and then the household or the parent and the university used to share 20%. Understand? So over the years, that automatic scholarship was you were granted. The moment you qualify for university, it is automatic. You'll get the grant. It's a scholarship. You don't have to pay for it. And then, of course, there was the creation of HELB. So HELB was mostly for tuition. In fact, when you got the HELB we used to give between 35 to a maximum of 60,000. So they would send 16,000 directly to the school, to the university, and the rest used to be in your pocket. That is what people used to have in their pocket to pay for accommodation, to pay for upkeep, just generally like a pocket money. So over the years, you realize that the government has actually reduced the funding from the 80-20, and at some point it was even 48-13. Then that is where the crisis happened. So the general that we had the equal subsidy. So if you're doing medicine, if you're doing BCom, if you're doing veterinary medicine, if you're doing Bachelor of Art, if you're doing economics, there was just this equal subsidy. It rested on every student. But now we have a new funding model that has been proposed by the new government.
Proposed and implemented.
Yeah, it's now in force. That means it's now we have to deal with it. So let's scratch the new model. In one way or another. So the new model has clustered funds into three. So we have a scholarship, then we have a loan, and then we have the household contribution. Household contribution is what also other people are calling the parental contribution or the guardian contribution. So this scholarship is what now goes, like Kitambo, the HELB and the capitation that the government was providing, the 80%. This scholarship it ranges from vulnerable to less needy. And then the loan is provided in form of 50, 30, 20. All right? Kitambo, we used to have a 32. No, we have the 50, 30, 20 for less needy, and then we have the 32, 48, 20 for less needy. So if we cluster this funding into scholarship, loan, and household contribution, it separates people. I think the idea that the government had is Kitambo, whether or not you are rich or can be able to afford university education, you are able to get the same funding. So they want to look at how can we better cushion the parents or the households that are vulnerable in terms of funding, in terms of funds. So we have newly created categories. Like I told you off camera, we have the vulnerable, we have the extremely needy, we have the needy, and then we have the less needy. How they arrived at this is where I have the problem. I think I've always had a problem with data because data is usually fronted on people's faces. Like, this is what science is, this is what data says. But we all know, from the NGO world to market to research to academics, data can be compromised, data can be tweaked, it can be doctored to actually to favor a certain narrative. So I don't know how well we actually believe and strongly throw our support behind the data that we have, behind the data that the government has.
Do you know some of the ways through which they actually come up with the needy, the less needy, and things like that?
One because we have the KNBS household survey that they did, and then
in order for them to come up with this new approach,
yes,
to funding education.
Yes, so this KNBS data registry is what they can scrub to actually see if it reflects. Because one thing we have, let's talk about, for example, last year we had almost 820,000 students sitting for KCSE. Do you know the number of people that qualified C+ and above? 145K.
Out of?
No, not 173K.
Out of?
Out of 820,000K and above. So out of 820, we have 173. And then the government has only picked 145,000 to support through higher education. So this, if you look at this 145, I was looking at it in terms of the percentages they make. So we have the categories that the government has made. The vulnerable are 20K, the extremely needy is 21K, and the needy is 24,000, and the less needy is 78,000. That is what makes now the 145. And so, if we look at the scholarship, the vulnerable are going to get a scholarship, a full, they call it 100% scholarship, or 205,000. Now, if you look at the extremely needy, they're going to get 175,000. And then the needy is going to get...
What?
Yeah?
How what?
This is per year. And then 100,000 for the needy, and then less needy, 95,000. And then if you look at the loan, the vulnerable are going to get 45,000. The extremely needy are going to get 75,000. And then the needy is going to get 100,000. And then the less needy is going to get 137,000. And then we have the household. So the household, the vulnerable, is not going to be contributing any. In other words, they've been excused. And then
21,000.
Yes, the 20K vulnerable students are not going to pay from their.
Do you know some of the things that makes you vulnerable?
What makes you vulnerable? I think they are looking in terms of the metadata. Which school did you go to? The carry pins for your parents or your guardians. Do you have a guarantor? What kind of school did you go to in primary or secondary? So, and then also from the household, the DSS data that they had from is it to 2019?
Do you think they used AI to put all these things together? And
I imagine they did.
And then you are split into different pools and saying, like they do the Champions League.
Most likely, because that would be a very interesting area for machine learning, because it can be able to pick data much faster and it can be able to organize this data really fast. What I have an issue is, how reliable is our data system?
I think the most reliable thing that I see there is the KRA pin. I think that is the most reliable thing that you can speak of. That is what might give you a little bit of truth about a child vis-a-vis their whatever. But you see now, the other problem is, what I see is today, this year in 2023, I might be having two parents that are, one is working at the UN and another one is working at KWS, for example. And then during December holidays, they are involved in a crash and they die. What happens to this kid? Does the government go back and say, all right, you are here, but now we think that you're now supposed to be here.
That is what I was calling off camera the social reality update.
Yes.
Because if you don't take into that account, if we use data from 2019, it means we are missing a lot because a lot has happened since then. There's a pandemic, there's a new government, there's inflation.
Yes.
A lot has happened in between. So if you use the data that is based on 2019,
but can you appeal? Can you appeal to be taken from one pool to the other?
Those are now what we might maybe talk about in the tail piece as recommendations. Because if we don't appeal, because look, take an example. I saw a post online of somebody making a joke that somebody is driving Nduthi in Kisii town. Kisii is a very busy town, so obviously there's this. It's a liquid town. So he's driving Nduthi, but he takes their kids to private schools, and they're paying almost 45,000 per month. So that reality is not the same in Homo Bay or let's say Muranga or Kilifi. These are different realities in different towns. So if we just lock people just based on the data that we have, it means we're not being reasonable. We're not being fair in real time, because a lot changes in one instance and another. And then also people lie a lot.
I think what the government should do is that this is where we have placed you. You have qualms with it, then tell us why you have qualms with it, and then we listen to you.
Yeah.
Right? And then we say, okay, fine. I have been put here, but next year, my social status has completely changed. And I feel like now I am very vulnerable. So the government should actually give me the 175.
True.
But then just saying that this is the pool where you belong for the next
4 years.
It's not realistic at all.
Realistic, is not real.
But then the question is again, the fee that you were seeing, that people were saying this fee is atrocious. The fees has nothing to do with what you give.
It has nothing to do with what you give.
So the fees is the fees. Then we look at what the government is giving you, and then it reduces. So the fee might be 625 per year.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, you are not going to pay 625. You'll probably pay just 100,000.
Yes. So that is how you are seeing the indices moving. If you from a vulnerable to a less needy, the gap moves up and down. It's kind of like a give.
But so for example, this boy who is my nephew, I do not believe his father has a KRA pen. I don't know. So, for example, how are they going to treat him right now?
So during the application process, they have I think a query where they ask you, and you have to also upload supporting document. Some of them.
So if your father is dead, they will ask you to upload the death certificate.
Yes. All those are very, very important, because how else would they?
Bungo, do you guys have a death certificate for your father?
And then also, how many people have KRA feed? How many people have the death certificate? So that's why I was telling you, our data registry as a country is questionable to so many extent, and for a long time, you see.
But then if they're giving you a form to fill. And your father is a farmer, big farmer, big farmer in Migori, doing maize and shit like that, and he doesn't have. There is no paper trail of his earnings.
I think the KRA has really done well in the last let's say 5 years.
How do they do it? How do you track a farmer? How do you track a farmer?
Well,
who is selling maize in Kisii
At some point, you'll have to make do with whatever it is they give. That's why I was telling you, people lie a lot when they even submit their data. Because I remember when we were applying for help back in our days, people used to lie a lot. I come from a really, and it's a common thing. Even when you're applying for grants.
Your father is a teacher, and you say that.
Yeah. I used to walk 10 kilometers to school.
Yeah.
Because we believed that you had to be in such a dire, pathetic condition for you to qualify for certain things. There are so many people who live, let's say, in I would say, let's say, 15,000 apartment, but they cannot be able to afford this school fee. Why? Because it's not just that child alone who's going to school. Yes. It's not just that responsibility of education that's there. So if you put that against it, if you pitch their earning or their income against the demands of this university fee alone, then you wing them further. Then you look at all these other tax systems that have been put in place. Then you see it's blotted already. The other thing is, This current financial year has 629 billion set apart for education. If, this is what I was imagining, if we cap that every student is going to get 200,000, right? And now we put it against the 145K students that have qualified, or they should qualify for this. Then it means that we are going to look at a budget of, let's say, between 30 to 40 billion, you know.
But that is just secondary education.
That's just secondary.
Then we have primary.
Then we have junior secondary, which has a capitation of, I think, 15,000 for every student. You know, this money, people are saying it does not even go to the student, that heads and other people in the intermediary are actually cashing big on CBC. So we have a bloated budget, national budget already. And then now you're adding more. And then you're spreading taxes. It's really you're rolling a pan with chapati. Like, you know, the weight is already too much and you're still crashing and you're not innovative enough. And then the other thing is policy communication. I think this and CBC has really, and this CBC and the house levy tax has received so much backlash. Why? These are very noble causes. You will agree with me. Every person wants their child to transition from one, you know, level of education to another, so that one day they become self-sufficient. Everyone wants to have a roof on top of their head. Everyone wants the primary or the foundational education level to be really good, which is what CBC is trying to actually cure. But now you have so much backlash, so much animosity from people, and people are telling the government, we're not understanding what is happening here. And then you also talked about appeals. I think right now, most students cannot appeal. KU is already admitting people by 16th. University of Nairobi is admitting people on 9th. I think other universities will be admitting people around the first week of October.
It's just going to be as complicated as
yes. So there's just a short time frame for you to even adjust. Because another thing is, remember this meme of people saying that, you know, all these things are balloon, but the salary, it's very small. So you're wondering, if the salary is still the same, but the demands are not, the tax obligation are not, how are you going to manage servicing this loan or servicing the school fee? Because education is not the only aspect that we have to live with. We have to deal with food. We have to live with health, rent.
All those
so many aspects of life.
All right.
Yeah. So I think this was a really noble. I think it was thought out. The only problem, I think,
are they trying to save money? Is it a money saving venture?
Not really. It is an efficiency problem. Because honestly, even in terms of tax obligation, it cannot be blanketed. You're supposed to look at an individual profile. The same way, if you're treating a patient, if you go to the hospital today, me and you, we will not be treated the same way, even if we have the same case that we've went with for a complaint at the hospital, at the doctor. So we'll have to look at individual profile. So I think it calls for considerations or recommendations. We have to really go back to how reliable our data systems are.
Yes, and that data has not been done properly.
Right, yes.
I've been complaining a lot, even the basic thing of trying to send somebody something to an address does not work in this city. Like somebody will call you 30 times to find your house.
Yeah. And they're just circling around your house.
So that problem, Rwanda dealt with it within 5 years. And they dealt with it. Right now, buildings are going up in town, and the government doesn't even know which
building is which.
Who is building these houses?
There's no geotagging. There's no information.
Yeah. There is no water. There is no electricity. There is nothing. People are going off grid. The government doesn't know. You see, and that is why the KRA is trying to tell people to pay tax simply because they have got an electric meter. What kind of bullshit is that?
That's not bullshit. Because you are also growing. Why
are you having 3 meters?
Yes.
To your name?
Yes.
Then you must have a rental.
Yeah. What about if you have maybe 3 houses, one in the village, one here, and another one maybe for your son or daughter?
Yes.
Or no, another wife.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are people who have holiday homes.
Yes.
So are they landlords?
So we have to really look in terms of what is our data infrastructure.
Yeah, the data infrastructure is very problematic in my estimation. And for me, I've made a lot of noise about this thing.
Mm.
So many things like cabs. Everything that is coming has got a sticker on it, but has cabs really looked at it?
There's been a lot of heat on cabs. The last one week, I'm sure you've seen it.
Yeah.
So people are saying that cabs sort of distanced itself from, like, if you're consuming something, that's on you. Hata sisi hatujui. Because that's the case. You have a diamond seal or a diamond whatever on these products and services, but is it really certified? That's the same thing goes back to universities. We had charters for universities, but are they capacity built to actually compete at a global level?
Or they should be looked at some point.
Yes.
What we chartered, is it still the same?
Yes. So that
we chartered it when you had 100 students in class. Now that we have got 300, we have to ask.
Yes.
Do you really still need the charter? Yeah, So thank you very much, Omondi Ochuka, for showing up. You've always been a friend of DWJ Dialogues with Jagero. And, it's always a pleasure, getting a lot of words of wisdom from you. Now, to my audience, thank you very much for tuning in. I would ask you one thing, that the reason why I'm doing this thing is so that I can get as many people as possible on this table and talk to them about issues that is affecting both of us. But I want to do this long-term plan. The only way to do it long-term plan is if you subscribe, if you comment, if you leave a message, and if you share what we are doing. So I'm asking you from the bottommost part of my heart, please share, please subscribe, hit on that notification bell so that whenever a video is out, you are able to get it and watch it and share in the knowledge. To the people that have subscribed, thank you very much. To the people that are always returning to watch, thank you very much. And until another video, thank you and goodbye.